What You Gotta Do is on now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of What You Gotta Do. Good morning, KT.
Hi, Cody Hardy. How are you doing?
I'm doing so great. I cannot complain. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. I'm drinking this wonderful smoothie that my dad just made me. He's trying to get me healthy, so I'm really feeling wonderful this morning. I am ready to go.
God bless Tom for getting you healthy. Thank you, Tom. Well, would you like you to go ahead and introduce this week's guest, KT?
I would love to. This week we have a super special guest. It's someone very dear to my heart, and I feel super emotional. And I'm a little bit nervous that she's here. Her name is Aubrey Boom Kopczynski. She is a licensed mental therapist, LPC, life coach, positive mindset mentor, and a lover of helping others take their lives to the next level. Aubrey works with both women and men. Her life was not always lived by the principles that it is today. She has done so much work and research on herself, her mindset, and her physical, emotional, spiritual, and psychological health. Her medium is her story, her education in psychotherapy, and her daily practice of meditation. She disseminates the ever-increasing body of knowledge she has acquired and shares these timeless and powerful truths with her clients. Aubrey is not only my friend, but she's also an owner of a licensed therapy practice in my community. I'm so lucky that she's my friend, and I really would love to say welcome, Aubrey.
Hi, Aubrey.
I'm so happy to be here, Katz. I love you so much. I'm excited to meet you and get to know you more.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you guys for having me.
We're very excited to have you. And Aubrey is not only beautiful on the inside, but she is very gorgeous on the outside, which means, didn't she win some sort of award, KT, about that?
Aubrey, you were like the Bachelorette of the Year in our city in like 2017. Was that it?
2016?
That is so sweet. Yes, along those lines. But thank you for bringing that up because that kind of made my day. I'd almost forgotten about that.
That's something you should always be proud of.
Yeah, I'd wear a t-shirt like that or
I
something.
love it.
Bachelorette of the Year.
Well, I'm excited to have Aubrey on the show today because when we were doing our pre-screen call, she seemed very passionate about a certain topic about fear. And so we're going to talk and discuss and really rely on Aubrey because she has a whole course on overcoming fear. And she wrote this whole thing about it, but I'm going to have her introduce it. I'm really excited because I do think that we live in a time. I was speaking to a really good friend of mine who retired recently, and she has not traveled in 2 years because she's afraid of getting sick and what that even looks like. It's overwhelming her life to where she doesn't really even leave the house. And so I think it's an appropriate topic for the time we live in. It's super relevant amongst a lot of things. So Aubrey, how did you stumble upon fear as that course?
Well, what I was realizing is that regardless of why clients were coming to me, the underlying reason was always fear. And I just saw it over and over and over again. And it made me consider situations in my own life that either I wasn't engaging in or things that I had wanted to do or study or think. And I would come up with these ridiculous reasons why not to. And it kind of broke my heart for everybody else and for myself. Why were we doing this? What are we afraid of? If you really think about that, what are you afraid of? We conjure up these scenarios in our mind of what's going to happen. And we go down this whole path and spiral into this anxiety and things that could happen and every negative option, but we don't live life.
Right.
And we end up like, if you don't live life, you lose it. And I just saw all these people losing their own life. And it's also so short. And at some point we're going to come to the end of it. And I just did not want to get to the end of my life and think of how sad that fear held me back. Like fear of what? Like of other people's opinions, of getting hurt, it's part of the life cycle. But to not engage in it was just, it was unacceptable to me.
I'm so glad you started to name off some of the reasons that people are afraid. I think you named a couple, like KT. I don't know, do you want to share a fear that you might have?
You know, we've talked about this before, that I've always been super shy, just basically fearful of everything. And I don't think I really realized that until I had the pleasure of being one of the first people to take Aubrey's course. And the one thing I learned was that fear is a liar. And here's the thing she really pointed out. Why am I afraid to pursue things? Well, I tell you what, we would not be doing this podcast right now had I not listened to Aubrey, because my whole thing was, why would I do a podcast? People aren't going to watch it. People aren't going to listen. People are going to laugh at me. People are going to make fun of me. And I realized, like she said, fear is a liar. And it made me think, no, they're not. People don't really care that much about me to actually think those thoughts. Like I started to kind of break down each one of my fears of doing it. And I thought, like she said, I got to live my life. I can't not do things because I'm scared. Let's do it. Let's do this podcast. You know, Cody, we talked about this for years. And finally that I just got to put my fears aside and go for it and do it. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work, whatever. Guess what? Me and you are having the time of our lives. And I'm really thankful to Aubrey and that course.
I love that you brought that up, Katz. It's really interesting when we break it down of what it is, like what truly is it that I'm really fearful of? Because normally it's just that feeling of anxiety that we don't ever root down enough to figure that out. And if it's that somebody's going to make fun of us or somebody's not going to listen to us, if you really look at it and say, let's say that really does happen. So what?
So what?
Let's say somebody makes fun of us. Yeah, that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with somebody's own level of understanding about themselves. And it's just when you just kind of transcend the situation and look at it for what it really is, it loses its power. Who cares if somebody doesn't listen if you guys are having fun? You know, it's like we put all of this weight on things that if we really look into it, even those don't really matter to us. And so it's really just transcending the emotion of it, stepping outside of it, and looking at things for what they are.
So how do you change that way to think, Aubrey? I think that's where people really struggle, is how they change that being, I guess, emotionally reactive to like just take a step back and give themselves some distance from that.
You hit the nail on the head here, because this is the thing. We're all at our own ages in life, right? So we've gone our whole lives usually with these same thought patterns. So if you go, decades with a certain thought pattern, how do you even change it? It all starts with awareness. If you aren't aware of what the issue is, you can't work on it. You can't change it. So it's really becoming aware of when I get triggered, aware of like a victimhood mentality, aware of my own anxieties, all of those types of things. And then little by little, you create a new neural path, and you shift out of, you kind of like hook out of that automatic thought process, that thought pattern, and you intentionally create a new one. And that takes effort, and that's where the work is. But to me, there was just nothing more important in my life than getting out of those thought patterns that brought me so much pain. It was unacceptable. I wasn't going to do it anymore. So that's why I threw myself into it. But sometimes you have to get to that dark place where you'll do anything so that you have the life that you want to design.
I remember in college, I read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I love that book. I had a hard copy for a long time, and now it's on my phone. And I try to read it every few years just to remind me about how important it is to choose. The bottom line of his book was, you have a choice every day of how you're going to react. He survived a concentration camp. He was a psychiatrist, if you don't know who he is. So he was a Holocaust survivor. Because he was a trained psychiatrist, he was able to look at things a little bit differently in the concentration camps and how people reacted to, the horrible circumstances that they were subjected to. But it was such an interesting book. So that's been inspiring to me about how the choices that I make and how important they are from a day-to-day standpoint. Is there someone who's inspired you specifically on that?
It's so interesting that you brought that up, because that book was absolutely transformative in my life. I stayed up all night years ago reading it, and I was at a certain crossroads in my life. Whenever anybody asks me what my favorite book is, that's it.
Wow. Mine too. That's crazy.
It's so good. It's awesome. We're twins, Cody.
Yeah, I know. It was like there's been a little soul love, little girlfriend crush, I guess.
And I realized then too, it's never the situation. It's our perception of the situation. And I always think a good example of that is divorce. Sometimes, in a certain situation, somebody can be devastated by a divorce. It can, upend their entire lives or, damaged for years from it. Other people can also get a divorce and be jazzed and excited and jump up and down, right? So it's not the actual event. It's how we're creating meaning about that event. That was the whole thing that I realized. I've been ascribing meaning to certain situations as if I'm a victim. And that's where people go. And that's what I kept noticing in session with friends, whatever. People would have this victimhood mentality. But if you ask them if they did, they would never believe it. Like nobody believes that they have a victim mentality. So since I kept seeing this, I thought, I wonder where my blind spots are for my own victim mentality.
Oh.
And that's, that's getting in.
That's scary to go down, Aubrey. Ew.
Oh, it's a gross feeling. But
right.
That was the whole thing when we were talking earlier. If you don't have the awareness, you can't change anything. So getting down to brass tacks with yourself and getting truthful with yourself and not making up excuses and the whole 9 yards. And sidebar to that, when you really are a victim to something and something happens that's so cruel or heartbreaking and it's not your fault, we're allowed to have like the full spectrum of human emotions. But I don't want to purposely suffer. Whether something was my fault or not, I have 100% responsibility in how I deal with that and how I integrate it. And so many people don't want to take that responsibility. And that's where I see people either really succeeding and changing their lives or just shrinking back into where they were.
So why don't people take responsibility? I mean, what holds us back from taking responsibility? Because, is it devastating? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of that, like, why are we afraid thing? Like, why are we afraid to take responsibility or be held accountable? Because what's really going to happen, bottom line, you're not going to die if you go down that path. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen?
It's such a good question because I've wondered this as well. Go Cats?
Well, I was thinking kind of our society encourages victimhood. That's how I feel.
That's a good point.
How do we snap out of that victim mentality?
Well, this is what I found is that people will try it, right? And they'll do it a few times, or maybe they'll even do it for a week. But you don't go 50 years thinking a certain way. And then in 1 week, all of a sudden you're going to have a new thought pattern. And I don't know, people don't want to put in the effort. And people don't like to hear that either. And they say it's too hard. And what I tell them over and over again, if you think something's hard, it's going to be a nightmare. You're going to have so much resistance around it. You're not going to want to do it. You're not going to engage in it. If you look at it as an adventure and with curiosity and how important it is, it makes it fun. You'll put forth the effort. You'll go for it. But people disempower themselves by the resistance, by the barriers that they put up.
It's so fun. I think it's so exciting when people start to explore that and get over it. I have a family member that I'm fairly close to who's just started to kind of open that door and go to therapy on a consistent basis. And I suggested, I said, you're welcome to call me. Like, it's such a fun journey. If you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk with you. And through those things, if you're emotionally jazzed up after a session, because I know the circumstance, and that has been a fun way to connect us. It's brought us closer. And I think it's really helped her support her because I keep asking and saying, well, when's your next appointment? Did you already schedule it? And so I really want I want people to be successful. I think we all do, KT. We talk about that. We want people to have a happy, happy life and not be traumatized by their childhood or their victims or their whatever's happened in their life. We want you to move past that and be abundant in life.
It also seems too that we have this almost an unconscious belief that if we deal with these issues and we change our mindset and we put in the work, that it somehow minimizes the pain that we've gone through, or we're letting somebody else off the hook who has wronged us. And once again, that's that victimhood mentality, but we don't realize it consciously.
Well, going back to that, I think that's so interesting that you brought that perspective into the victim mentality, Aubrey. The fact that you're letting someone off the hook is a trait of a victim. Like, I wouldn't think of it like that, to be honest with you, but you're exactly right. It's like, what are your behaviors as a victim? And those are the things that you have to stop doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Aubrey's email to me before this, she said, we direct our fears and walk through them or allow them to control us. We have the choice. We don't always get to choose whether we experience fear or not, but we get to choose how we respond to it. I thought that was an interesting way that you put that. We don't get to choose whether we experience fear. Like it's okay to be afraid. I think is that what you're saying? Like allow yourself to feel the fear, but then do something about it.
Exactly. There's a lot. So I really enjoy being really positive and looking for the good, and that's really been beneficial to me. But oftentimes when we get into that territory, we feel like if we experience negative emotions, that we're not doing the work or that something's wrong with us or whatever. And then that's so defeating. And it's also just discounting that we're human and that that's part of our experience. Where I see the work is allowing myself to have those feelings, because if we don't process through them, then they'll come up in other ways, but not getting stuck there. And that is 100% up to me if I'm going to either just process it and feel it, or if I'm going to get stuck in it and ruminate there and be resentful or maybe want revenge or just like all of those stories that we come up with in our head when something happens or regret. And that's the choice. Sometimes we have things that happen that we would have never, ever designed. But what do we do with it? And are we going to integrate it where we would like it to be placed in our lives? Or are we going to allow it just to control us and just always be reacting to it? And I just didn't want to be reacting to negativity in life anymore. And that's why, I guess I've been doing this for about 11 years. And at the beginning, I didn't know if these concepts were even going to work. I was just at the end of the rope that I thought, like, I'm going to try anything, I'm just whatever. But I really put forth the effort into changing not only how I saw situations, but at the negative situations, how could I make that work for me? Like with Viktor Frankl, he's in a concentration camp. If he can do it in a concentration camp, I can probably do it in present day America.
Right?
Why not?
I know. We're not fearful. Oh, good grief. Our circumstances are so much better than those.
Mm-hmm. And also what we focus on expands. If I'm always thinking about something that I'm upset about, then I'm going to always feel upset. If I'm focusing on the things that are beautiful and wonderful and what I'm grateful for, that is what I'm going to connect with. Other people who are grateful, other opportunities that bring gratitude to me. And I just didn't understand in the past how that energy worked. That vibe, that vibration that I'm emitting, I'm going to connect with a similar vibration, and that's going to strengthen. So what I was truly doing, and people don't like to hear this either, when you're in a really negative vibe and you're angry or whatever, you're going to connect with other experiences that bring you that same type of a frequency. So it's not that I was like making things happen to me that were horrible, but I was responsible. I was a responsible party.
Go, Katie.
It's funny that you bring up the vibration. Me and Cody have been talking about that the past 2 days. All of a sudden, it's just been the whole vibration level. And what you just said, if you're on that vibe, you attract that vibe. And if you're not, you attract the vibe you're on. And I never thought of it like that. Thank you for saying that. Hey, can I segue into something else? I was just wondering, did you always know that you were going to be a therapist and do this? Or did it just come later in your life? Or were you always the one that your friends went to for advice? Or have you always been kind of the mentor for people?
I didn't always know I was going to be a therapist, but I've been really interested in mental health since I was little, because I always wondered, why do people behave in certain ways? Why do people think in certain patterns? Why do people not do certain things? And I always just would witness people and wonder what was behind it. That was just something I've been fascinated by. And then my friends would always come to me. And I just really have always been interested in the mind and personality, and how do two different people experience the exact same thing and interpret it completely differently? And it's because of their experiences, of the past. And how can you change that? Can you change that? Those types of things. And those are things I would go to bed with at night, in my mind. And it was just something I was always very interested in. But I didn't know if I was going to do it for a living or not.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, I want to talk about the life coach part. The thing that just so turned me on about you was your concept of when you did your life coaching, when you do that, about the physical activity that you actually put into your counseling with it, and how you said, this is not an exercise course. It's just how you kind of feel like if you're out walking or riding or whatever with somebody, they're more apt to share real feelings with you. That just got my attention. You're so right on with that. How did you come up with all that? How did that come?
So that's twofold. One, when my boys were little, I realized that if we were in the car and they weren't looking at me eye to eye, they would divulge more information. Right? So that just always stuck.
Yes.
Two, I know that when I'm on my bike or I'm running, or if I'm just out in nature in the mountains, that I'm in a different frequency. And if you're actually endorphins are flowing, the whole 9 yards. So if I'm walking with somebody in the mountains, they're not eye to eye with me. They're in a different frequency. They have the mountain air. The modality is, it's not just talk therapy face to face. You know, they're hearing other experiences, tactile experiences, and they're just getting a more comprehensive experience. And then that experience is imprinted on them differently than just going to an office and talking one-to-one. And there's a certain type of person who really appreciates that. So I was able to attract a certain kind of clientele that I was really aligned with. And I loved that. And most people weren't doing outside therapy at that time. And it was just kind of a neat little niche that seemed much more effective than in-office therapy. Thanks, Kat.
It is very unique. I actually, when you told me that she did that, I thought that was really cool. I think we need more of that. It's holistic, right? It's because your mental health is more than just talking to somebody. It's doing actions. It's physical activity. It's nutrition. It's the whole, if you want to be truly mentally healthy, you have to do all of the things.
Exactly. And what I often talk about with life coaching clients too is, what do you eat? And I don't mean carbs or calories, anything like that, but does what you eat, is it serving you? Is it nutritious? Is it bringing you the kind of feelings that you want? Or are you always in shame and regret and having too much sugar that's you're crashing and these types of things? That's just one little part of it. With life coaching, it's everything. And what we often think is, oh, that's so little, that's not really affecting my depression. Actually, it is affecting your depression. And so is this, and so is that, and so is this. And each of those are small changes, but it's those small changes that really make the biggest difference. And people who are committed to doing it just are amazed at the difference of eating differently, of exercising. And I don't mean doing an exercise you don't enjoy, but what brings you joy, what lifts your spirits. Don't try to engage in something that you can't stand doing. You know, and we kind of have these rules for ourselves. I've got to do this. Now I have to work out. Oh my God, I didn't work out for 5 days. Well, you didn't work out for 5 days because you didn't want to, because you don't really like it. That's really good. You know, don't eat broccoli and Brussels sprouts if you don't like them. You're not going to continue doing it. Don't do a type of therapy if you're like, oh, I have therapy tomorrow. Great. You know, it's like we think that we need to be doing things, but anything that we feel like we have to, we need to, anything along those lines, we're going to have resistance around. So how can we make it a little sweeter? How can we make it a little more inviting if it's something we have to do, in quotes? And it's just that perception. It's like when I have to clean my room. I don't want to clean my room. But what I do want is a nice environment and this and that. So it's like I get to clean my room. And it sounds like such a little change. But if you say you have to do something, you already have that negativity in your mind. And that's another thing that most people think is too small. It's not really going to make a difference. It does make a difference. We just have to start looking at situations with different eyes and with more gentleness. Like I have a room. I have all these clothes in my room. I've got this. Look at all these beautiful gifts I have. I'm so grateful. Like I'm going to clean it. I'm going to take care of myself and my environment. It really makes a difference. It sounds kind of cheesy, but it's not.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about gratitude. When you have and you live in a grateful life and you're grateful for your things, you're constantly acknowledging that you have the amenities, just the basic essentials of life. And I mean, it's enough to sustain you. It should be enough to fulfill you. That's my, I guess, view on it is, are those simple things, are they enough to give me happiness? Yeah. Basic needs, they bring me all the happiness in the world. Like, I definitely feel very abundant and grateful for that. Everything else is just
True.
great. KT, do you have anything else?
My dad did want me to ask you, Aubrey, who was your hero growing up?
That's so cute. Your dad. I love it.
That was his one question for Aubrey.
I absolutely adore my dad, and I love him so much. And he has been somebody that I can speak to freely. And though I don't feel like maybe he agrees with everything that I say, he gives me the spaciousness to be myself. And I think that's the greatest gift, is when you allow somebody to be who they are without judging them. And so that was a really cool gift that my dad has given me.
That's very sweet. I appreciate you saying that.
You know, Aubrey, your dad is the one who taught me holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And that goes along with resentment, jealousy, that sort of stuff. And he's a great teacher. I appreciate him.
All right. Well, now it's time to talk about what you got to do with this topic of fear, now that we've had this conversation about that. So my call to action, my what you got to do this week is, you said something about how looking at your phrasing, you have to clean your room. No, you get to clean your room. Those are the little things that I want to change in my life, is just pay attention to how I'm saying things so that they are a little more positive on that end. That's my takeaway. KT, do you have one?
So that's it. And I constantly work on fighting my fears. You know I do all the time. So that's one thing I've learned from Aubrey, and I'm really thankful, Aubrey, that I was able to take your course. Do you still have that course online, or are we able to go to it and click on it?
Yes, I have a link to it. So my website is albuquerquetherapist.com, but under my bio there's a link.
Therapist with an S.
With an S. Yeah. There's a link on there that links to another website of mine that is aubreyboom.com, and that's where that course is
We
located.
will put them in the links down below for our listeners to click on and hopefully follow you.
Yeah, it's a great course, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Aubrey, do you have a call to action of what you got to do?
My call to action would be to detach from the outcome. And I know we didn't speak about that, but so many times we are so attached that a particular situation has to end up the way that we want it to. And then we lose the lessons and we become angry and we become fearful. If we're engaged in that certain mindset and we're growing and expanding, that in and of itself is learning and growing. And just detaching from that outcome takes away that weight that we're carrying. Whatever happens, we're going to be okay. And just knowing that and having that self-trust, I feel, is everything.
I love that.
I'm like taking notes here.
I know, me too.
I wrote down everything.
Thank you for the free counseling
from the
session
outcome.
today. All right. So, warm, fuzzy, cold, prickly. Let me explain what this is about for those who are maybe listening for the first time. So every week we talk about a cold prickly, which could be something that happened negatively in your life, hopefully that you turn into a positive, that's our point. Or you have a warm fuzzy, which is something positive and impactful that maybe you did or somebody did for you, or just something that gave you a nice uplift of energy. So Aubrey, you said you had both a warm fuzzy and a cold prickly. So she's a little overachiever that's going to share both with us today.
She is an overachiever. Good job, Aubrey.
It's one situation that started out as a very cold prickly and ended as a warm fuzzy. And last weekend, I had a most negative situation that really upset me and threw me in for a moment to the victim mentality, because, I didn't feel like this was of my own doing. And I felt like I was really slighted in this situation. And there was a lot of gravity to this topic in my own life. It was something that meant a lot to me. So it was just really hurtful. And I started kind of going down that path of just the ruminating thoughts about, it's this person's fault and why would they do this and la 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 and yada yada and just that whole vibe, right? And on Monday, I realized I had the awareness that I was doing that. And okay, let me go back for a second. You know how usually it's your own level of understanding and how much work you put towards your own mindset is how quickly you can shift out of a negative situation. But sometimes, depending on the gravity of that situation, it can take a minute, okay? So this is the first time that I was able to shift out immediately with a topic that meant so much to me. And I just realized, like, I have the power. I don't have the power of being hurt by this situation because I'm a human and this hurts me, but I have the power if I'm going to suffer about this situation, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to waste 1 minute of my life suffering needlessly because the situation is what it is. And I couldn't believe that the negativity and the sadness and whatnot actually left me. And I was able to direct my own inner experience like that. Because in the past, it's always been a real process. I mean, some come much more quickly than others, but this was the first time that it was immediate. And so I was so excited. And I realized that work that I did put in, I'm so grateful. Now I'm experiencing the benefits of it. And to me, there's just nothing more important, more beneficial than giving yourself that gift of your mindset. Because we take ourselves into every situation in life. And people will spend money on vacations and they'll spend money on the way that they look and on their car. They won't take the time and energy and resources to work on their mindset.
Well, because it's so much easier to take the magic pill, to go get the Botox, to go on those things, drink that drink, take the drug. I mean, there's so many things that you can do that's easier than actually doing the work for yourself, that people avoid that all completely because it can be difficult and it is a long process. It's like losing weight. If anybody's lost a significant amount of weight, it's a pound at a time. That's literally what you're doing in your mind. But when you can lift that weight off of your mind, you can move into those situations and those mindsets quicker. It's just like exercise, right? You're toning your body, you're toning your mind so that you can shift and do those things quicker and more efficiently.
Exactly.
I love it. That is so fantastic.
Thank you. That's an awesome. It turned into a great warm fuzzy. I'm so happy you said that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Aubrey, is there any final words that you want to say before we sign off for the week?
Just that life is for the living. We're alive right now. Let's live our lives.
I love that. Somebody said how people say you only live once. That's false. You only die once. So live your life every day.
Yeah.
So it should be YODO instead of YOLO.
I like it. That's sweet, buddy.
You only die once. Thank you for joining us this week. Again, all of our contact information as well as Aubrey's website and how to contact her will be listed in our links below. Remember to take action, claim freedom, and have a fantastic week.
Thank you. Thanks, Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Have a good week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to What You Gotta Do. The music for this podcast is written, produced, and performed by Joe Steitler. Production manager and host for What You Gotta Do podcast is Cody Hardy. Creative director is Matt Johnson. I'm KT Johnson, your co-host and editor. This has been a hell of a production.
What you gotta do is listen!